Welcome to the third and final part of today's lecture. We're starting off this part with a definition about two matrices being row equivalent. We say two matrices are row equivalent if one can be attained from the other via elementary row operations. As you probably saw from the last example, and if you're trying your own examples as you were going along, is that there's a lot of choice when we're doing row operations. So it would appear at first glance that if you took a matrix A and you're asked to put it into reduced row echelon form, you may not get the same answer as somebody else who was started with the same matrix. But the following theorem actually implies that that will never happen. So one way to think about what the next theorem is saying is that there's a uniqueness property. So every matrix, okay, is row equivalent to a unique reduced row echelon matrix. So what the theorem is saying is if I gave you a matrix and asked you to put it into reduced row echelon, okay, so notice that it's important that we're talking about reduced row echelon form, and you got your answer, and someone else in the class had the exact same matrix and put it into reduced row echelon matrix, the theorem is saying you guys will have the exact same answer. Now, if I asked you to put it into echelon matrix form, then that would not necessarily be true. You may start with the same matrix and end up putting it into different echelon forms. So the beauty of this theorem is saying that any matrix, it may not look like there's a uniqueness property going on, but if you were to force it into its row reduced echelon form, then you get a unique form. Okay? So just as an example here of what I'm talking about, we saw in the last part that we were looking at the matrix 0, 2, -1, -3. We have 0, 6, -3, and 0, 0, 0, and 15. Okay, this is a matrix, and we actually saw that this matrix here, by performing row operations, that it's actually row equivalent to 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, -1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. So these are row equivalent because you can obtain one from the other by row operations. However, this here is the unique reduced row echelon form of the matrix on the left. I can change the echelon form quite easily. I can multiply the first row by 100 and it would still be row equivalent to the guy on the right. Okay. So when you're dealing with it, it looks like unfortunate that if you're asked about kind of some uniqueness properties of your matrix, the only way that you can get that information is if you can bring it all the way down into the reduced row echelon form, which looks like it would involve a lot of work, just even from our one simple example. However, there's actually some information that is unique, and that is actually the position of the leading entries. So if you go back to the examples that I did in the last video, we first put our matrix into echelon form. Okay, so just let me rewrite it out in echelon form. 6 minus 6, 3, 0, 0, 0, 15. So this was our matrix after we put it into echelon form. Then we put it into row echelon form. We had 1, 2, -1, minus 3, 0, 1, minus 1.5, and 0, 0, 0, 1. And then we ended up with 1, 0, 1, 0. So this was the reduced row echelon form of the matrix. Okay. So even though these matrices are not unique and they all look like they're different, you notice actually that they do have one property the same is where their leading entries are. So I'll circle the leading entries. Okay, so these are my leading entries. So we want to give a name for the positions of these leading entries, and that's what we call a pivot position. So a pivot position in a matrix A is a location in the matrix such that corresponds to a leading one in the reduced row echelon form of A. Now, the beauty of this is even though it's talking about the reduced row echelon form, like in this matrix right here, you can already see the pivot entries from the echelon form. So knowing some of the information about the reduced row echelon form is already embedded in this particular matrix on the left once you have it in echelon form. And a pivot column is just a column that corresponds to a pivot. So let me just highlight some of these things right here. So this guy, and this guy, these guys are pivots, and this column, and this column are the pivot columns. And one nice thing about linear algebra is that a lot of the information that we may be looking for is actually embedded inside of the pivot information. So let me write that down for your notes. So facts, oops, just fixing this up, fact, many results in linear algebra can be translated into results about pivots. Okay, so where are the pivots and how many pivots are there? So there's a bunch of new things here from today's lecture that you should internalize. Okay, so the first of all is we introduced a bunch of new terminology, which is the reduced row echelon form of a matrix. This is an idea that will come up over and over again. And I'll put this in red here and I'll write crucial. The other key thing that you learned today was Gaussian elimination. And so let me just say here is you must master Gaussian elimination. Gaussian elimination turns out to be this extremely powerful tool to understand systems of linear equations and many other problems in linear algebra. We'll see this over and over again, so it's important that you understand the procedure that I described in today's lecture. Finally, let me just say something about our next lecture. Remember, the whole point in our first lecture is that we're interested in solving systems of linear equations. And today, all we're doing is manipulating a matrix. So what we're going to do in the next lecture is we're going to tie these two ideas together. Okay, so we're going to use Gaussian elimination to solve systems of linear equations, just showing the power of this procedure. So I look forward to talking to you in our next lecture. Have a good day. Bye.